Okay. So I want to welcome everyone here today for this sustainability seminar. My name is Nancy Holm. I'm Assistant Director here at ISTC, the seminar organizer along with Beth Mashesky. This spring, our seminars are focused on water conservation, water quality, and general sustainability topics. We have a schedule. We've added a few new ones. If you picked a schedule up before or looked at our schedule online before, we have a few new seminars that we added for this spring. So we have those schedules out here on a table outside the conference room, or else for those listening online, you can look on our website for those events. And in case you cannot attend on one of the seminar days, we do broadcast live all of our seminars, and then they are recorded and archived on our website. We have over 200 of the previous seminars on our website. With that, I want to begin today's seminar and would ask that everyone in attendance here please silence your cell phones. And also, we're going to hold questions to the end, and then we can ask the speaker, and I'll pass around this microphone because we are recording the talk, and then we'll record the questions. And for those viewing online, you can type in your questions at any time, and then we'll answer those at the end also. We're very pleased today to have as our guest speaker Erin Durnbaugh, who is the Director of Sustainability at Loyola University in Chicago, which has 5 campuses and 3 academic centers. Working across the curriculum, culture, and campuses of Loyola, Mr. Durnbaugh is building innovation and efficiency into the university's programs and the student experience, focusing on water protection, energy conservation, and mission-driven sustainability action. He currently serves as Vice Chair for the Chicago Wilderness Alliance and is a member of the Vibrant Cities and Urban Forest Task Force. Previously, he has served as Deputy Commissioner for the Chicago Department of Environment's Natural Resources and Water Quality Division. The Department of Environment was the lead agency that implemented the Chicago Climate Action Plan. He holds a master's degree in geography and environmental studies and is a LEED certified professional. So with that, I'll turn the program over to Erin, who is joining us online today from Chicago. Erin?
Thanks so much, Nancy. Hopefully everyone can hear me. If I don't hear any corrections, I'll just keep going. So thanks, Nancy and Beth, for allowing me to present some of this work, and of course for the support of this project that I'm going to be presenting today to everybody. And also, of course, a big thank you for allowing me to present it from here in Chicago. It seems like the snow has tapered off here in Chicago. I don't know if you're still getting it downstate, but I appreciate not being in the car during the snow either. On my way there or on my way back. So, so just for everyone who's there or online, what I'm hoping to share with everyone is a project that was funded from ISTC and of course from some resources here at the university at Loyola, and that really focused on water efficiency right on our own campus in our own backyard. I'll get into some more of the details, but just for an overview of what I'd like to share, let's see. This is a project that took place in 2014 and into the spring of 2015. It was really broken down in 3 main efforts. One focused on water fixture retrofits, so physical change out of equipment. Another one looking at behavior change, and that started as a little bit of more of a minor project, but it certainly developed its own life through some securitists, but also great partnerships with some faculty here in our psychology department. And then maybe one that went in the reverse, we thought we might do a little bit more here around laboratory fixtures, and that ended up being sort of a minor effort. So I'll go through what we did on all 3 of those, and then later I'll share the results of all 3 of those. But I really want to start by saying that this came from, student-led interest around water issues. I'll share more about that, but how we got the interest in this, how we got the focus of where to pay attention and what to work on really came from student-led interest, and then audit projects that we were able to help share and coordinate, but they were really the ones who sort of pointed the finger on where we should be looking. So I'll share a little bit more on that background, but it's we couldn't do this without the interest of our students on our campuses and their engagement around these sustainability and water issues. It also came a little bit, and I mentioned it here in this last bullet, around some of the strategies we implemented came from things that weren't focused on water, but were focused on energy or waste-related behavior change campaigns that had been successful. So I'll try and touch on that a little bit as I go through my presentation. I hope to spend about a half hour sort of in sharing the slides and presenting, and then certainly leaving enough time for any questions or comments or follow-up. So before we jump in, let me just address maybe some assumptions that I had going into this project, that if you're thinking about doing a water conservation project in an institutional setting, you might want to address before you even start. One is, don't assume that you haven't done water efficiency work, that you haven't updated fixtures or gone and done any, maybe not water audits, but gone through and as you've updated other aspects of a building, you haven't done retrofits. In getting the students into the buildings and doing audits, we really realized, this was a little bit before this project, but that a number of buildings actually had significant audits conducted, and had not significant audits conducted, but had significant retrofits. It was really about ferreting out the areas that maybe hadn't been touched, because sometimes I think on the facility side there's an assumption if a significant retrofit had happened to a building that everything had been touched, and if you go through in a sort of systematic audit structure, you can find those things that maybe were neglected either for cost reasons or just for the staging of a project, and find those and pick those out. But the second bullet's really at it. While audits are great projects for students to undertake, it's always important for those findings to really be verified by your facility staff. Students, it can be great in sort of decentralized information collection, but they don't always have the filters that a facility staff can have on exactly why different pieces of equipment function the way they do. I'll share a little bit more when I talk about what we did on what was included in the audits, but just to say that while students can do audits, there's really a give and take with the facility staff on how we interpret those audits. Again, similarly, students like to jump in with then developing scenarios of what retrofits should be considered and what should be undertaken. Likewise, it's really up to the facility staff and engineering staff to decide which of those appropriate fixtures should be implemented, which of those retrofits should be undertaken, given they know the use, and I say right there, the abuse that that these fixtures will take, especially in like a residence hall setting. You don't want the most dainty handle or trickiest, most stylish faucet. You really want to make sure it'll take to what the life of a piece of equipment in that setting. And then we did a little bit of piloting, specifically with some dual flush toilet handles in some of our residence halls to see how those work. But that's always a good practice, right? Is if you're thinking about retrofitting significant numbers, find some areas where you can pilot that technology or that equipment before you roll them out in a big number. This is sort of the background of why this got attention here at Loyola. In the bars that you see in this chart on slide 4, that's the water consumption in 1,000 gallons. So when you see 100,000, that's really 100 million gallons a year. And then the line is the cost that we are paying using the right side there, the right side axis, to see the cost. So we went from having a water bill between our two main campuses at Lakeshore and Water Tower in the $250,000, $300,000 range, all the way up over $800,000 in a pretty short time span. Let me give you the background on that. One is that there was an exemption for water and sewer costs that the city had extended to nonprofit organizations, and Loyola is a nonprofit private institution, and so that exemption was removed. I will say I was on the other side of the fence at that time. I worked for the city of Chicago at that time, and so there was a lot done to try and soften that blow, but it's certainly a blow for nonprofits, maybe less so for a large institution like Loyola, but for a small struggling church or small struggling nonprofit organization, having to pay for water was a significant challenge. The other part of that is at the exact same time, there was an increase in water and sewer rates. So you have both the exemption going away and these rates increasing, and that's why you see this significant increase in the cost, which of course, rightfully so, leads to then an interest in water conservation, so you don't have to bear the brunt of that. But even though we had sort of stabilized our water consumption at just over 100 million gallons annually, the cost was significant, and so it really drove some interest around here, and that's one of the jobs I get to have, is to sort of point the attention to something like this to say, oh, well, maybe we should spend some time on water conservation. Just an aside here, something I was really interested in when I look at this numbers, and maybe some of the folks in the room or on the call might also be interested in, is 100 million gallons for, 4.2 million square feet and 16,000 students and, yada, 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 80 buildings. Is that a lot or a little? I still don't really have the answer to that question. I'd love to know if 100 million gallons, 110 million gallons is a lot or a little. I tried going to ASHE, to the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Ed, and pulling data from the institutions that report through the STARS framework to try to look at different campuses and different campus types, and unfortunately, the new data isn't available. I'd still like to do that, is to get a feel for what should, in a college campus, which is very different than a business setting or a purely residential setting or whatever, based on some different variables like the acreage of the campus or the square footage of the building or the number of students or population of the residential population, or these kinds of normalizing factors. What is sort of a goal for total water use? And that's something that I'm really interested in pursuing. If anybody has ideas on that or has data that they can point at, I'd be very interested in receiving that. So this was anyway a place to start on where we should be going. Going on, we then take just the water consumption and we break it down. This is sort of a course breakdown, but you can see the stuff that's there in the magenta is the residential. So those are residence halls. And it's just about half of the water consumption, a little bit more some years. So that's definitely an area to focus on. And so that was really where we directed the students, is once we see a number like this, which residence halls should we prioritize to look to do audits and look for water efficiency options? I guess I'll say another reason why to engage students around residence halls is, of course, that's something they're very comfortable with. They live there. All of our first year and second year students need to live in residence halls. Second year can kind of get an exemption, but for the most part, first and second year students live in residence halls. So there's an opportunity for them to sort of take action, study and take action where they live, and they get more motivated around that concept. Going on, we can then start dividing our residence halls by water use. And this isn't just overall water use, this is normalized by bed. So this is 3 years of water data. For the most part, I think 2 of the halls, the ones that you see with asterisks, we only had 2 years of data, but the others were 3 years of water data. By use and by cost, pay attention to the use side. I think the cost I mentioned has some issues with it, but both looking at it by the number of beds, which is per capita, and then by the area, because those are 2 sort of factors we looked at. Just hold on, I'll come back to this slide in just a moment. But certainly looking at, which halls to prioritize was part of the project. So now let me explain about the project. That sort of led us up to where we were and how we put together a proposal for this project and where some of the motivation was coming from Loyola. But now I'm going to talk specifically what we did on these 3 different projects, first starting with residence hall retrofits. So following a series of water audits, the students and verified by facility staff identified these different retrofit opportunities. It was something we sort of had agreed internally we wanted to work on, but we didn't really have much impetus or much sort of pushing us to prioritize this. And that's where a grant like this comes in so handy. Even though the actual amount we spent as Loyola University is very significant, especially when you think about the labor or the in-kind time of either my staff's time, or the students that worked on this, or the researchers, or the facility staff. But just knowing that we're getting this money really makes it a priority for our facility staff and for the researchers that were a part of it. So I really want to thank again ISTC for that opportunity. Going on just for a second, this kind of gives us an idea, I guess, a little bit about which residence halls we should look at. So you'll see there's a little bit of switch depending on the two ways we've normalized it, but basically they're pretty close. These are the names of the residence halls. You see Mertz Hall. One time it's the worst by area, one time it's fourth from worst, but it certainly gives you an idea of where to focus your attention. I will say, because of how the behavior change project was implemented, we weren't able to quite focus on all of these, and because of some other work that was happening. So Mertz Hall, which you see highlighted in light blue, and Fordham, which you see sort of in a golden color, those two were not able to get any retrofits because there was a plan to do significant retrofits in both those buildings, and they're also very large residence halls. Mertz, I think, has 600 students, and Fordham has 200 or 300 students in it. That was already planned and underway. So because of this project, those were sort of set aside and weren't worked on, but the others that you see highlighted, as well as Spring Hill and Canisius, which weren't highlighted, were worked on as part of this project, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But this is kind of the process we went through in identifying our opportunity areas. Just to talk about audits for one moment, water efficiency audits are great ways to get students involved. As long as you can get them the permission to access different spaces, they're very good about going room to room, collecting the information that you need, the fixture, the actual flow rates, the listed flow rates, where things are, and of course other aspects. I mean, we really work with our students to make sure they have their heads up. So they may be collecting information on water, but they may be looking for other energy opportunities, certainly leaks or deferred maintenance, even things like very low flow rates can be indicative of other problems within the infrastructure, pipes that have blockages or aerators that are full of crud or something like that, which then becomes an opportunity for facilities to prioritize their work. So as I said before, even though those audits are really great, they also need to be verified by the facility staff. So yeah, I put some information at the very end of this presentation that has some other resources that are available, either locally here in the Chicagoland area, but also nationally around water efficiency resources. There are a lot of great ones out there about how to conduct water audits and what things to look for. But obviously a university setting is slightly different than some of the things they're focused on, so I think there's still more resources that need to be shared into the general world. One of the aspects of audits I just want to highlight for a second is, and this is sort of the difference between a student audit and what facilities folks might be looking at, is once you sort of think about interventions, some interventions are very easy and some interventions take a lot of work and cost and time. And so, it's good for those audits to recognize all the opportunities, but, replacing a complete toilet, which may then get into flooring, which may then get into other plumbing connections, is very different than simply adding an aerator, or same thing with something like adding a dual flush valve for some kinds of fixtures, a pressure fixture. That's pretty easy. For classic sort of reservoir and bowl toilet, that may be more difficult because the that toilet may not accommodate a dual flush handle quite as easily. So that's something that just doing the audit doesn't necessarily mean you're going to directly link to those savings, and that's another way that the student versus facilities sides can be aligned. So here's just a summary of all the retrofits that we undertook as part of this project. This is, just a sheer number. I'm going to go through some slides pretty quickly. I'm not going to get any detail, but it shows the actual thing that we changed out as we go through. So here we go. We can see adding a dual flush toilet fixture to a classic reservoir and bowl toilet. See some costs here. See some estimated savings. This is the pressure system. You see the dual flush toilet there. I'm not going to spend any time on these. This presentation can be shared by everybody, so you can use this, go back and look at this, but I'll just move through this. Switching out a whole toilet, of course. Oftentimes it's the actual toilet itself that needs to be switched. As I mentioned, this is a much more involved thing. We thought early on we'd be doing many more full toilet retrofits, but when we realized that it would mean a lot of flooring work, we had to delay those and put those off. Replacing faucets or just replacing aerators on existing faucet. Sort of depends on what faucet was in place, if aerators were easily done or not. Obviously, just putting an aerator on is very cheap. And then these automatic flush valves for urinals or for toilets. And then finally, high-efficiency shower heads. In the residence hall setting, it's both bathrooms, shared bathrooms, and sort of apartment-style bathrooms, but there's also I should have mentioned the faucets were both in a bathroom faucet or in a kitchen faucet. So that's just sort of a little overview of what we did for the retrofits, ended up doing as part of this project. I'll get into the results of that a little later, but I want to keep moving here into what we did during the behavior change campaign, because as I said, this started out sort of as a smaller part of this project. Originally, we had some ideas. We were going to do some signage and some engagement, and it really turned into a much larger effort because of this partnership with psychology. Person who worked with me on this, Han Pham, had some contacts in psychology, so she and I met with one of our faculty members, Dr. Robin Mallett, and her graduate assistant, Calla Melchiori, and we really just wanted their feedback on some of the signage and some of the messages. From that first meeting, what it turned into was a full-blown social science research project on different messaging, different impacts of this messaging. But in doing that, we really then had to divvy up both the retrofits and the behavior change implementation so that we could get into more of a classic research scenario, as you see lined out here. So what we tried to do was get relatively equal square footage and populations, and we took these 7 residence halls, and you can see it on this slide, to get these different interventions. So one residence hall, which has 56,000 square feet, 215 beds, got both the retrofit and the behavior change intervention. One residence hall, which is 150 students, 44,000 square feet, got only the retrofits. 2 residence halls, which added up to 175 students, got just the behavior change messaging. And then 3 residence halls, which added up to 190 and 58,000 square feet, were the controls. So that's what that means. You'll see this a little bit later when you see some of the results, but you'll see them clumped when you see the results. You don't have to worry too much about the note. It's just to say when we were normalizing the data, some had 3 years data, some had 2, and we had to sort of account for that. There are some other factors that went into this. Seattle and Xavier, which you see in the control setting, you might remember those from one of the earlier slides. They were way far on the right as far as needing using a lot of water, considering their size or the number of students. However, we don't know how long they'll be part of our campus. There's plans to either do significant construction or to take them down. So we didn't want to invest retrofit money into those. We could have done behavior change, but we put those into the control category partially because of that, because we didn't know what the future was for those residence halls. So here's a timeline and overview of what we did as part of that project. I'll just say that there was an initial survey, and we were looking at a couple different things, but really looking at some of the values and the goals that those students had across all those residence halls prior to any kind of behavior change campaign. And we'll show you the result there. It was a good result, a good response rate. Almost half of all the students that lived in those residence halls responded. And then we started in the fall to pilot some of the retrofits to make sure they would work, and then sort of the behavior change campaign was just getting started in the beginning of the fall semester. In winter, we started doing the major retrofits, and then in spring, the behavior change campaigns really hit their stride. And then a second survey took place late spring that asked some of the same questions, but also asked some specific questions about the retrofits that had been implemented or the behavior change campaigns that they'd observed for those folks who had been part of the behavior change stuff. And then we had a small number of retrofits which we couldn't get in for some reason. They were put in late in spring of 2015. So that's just a timeline of what we did. I'm going to go through some of the behavior change things that we undertook. One was a pledge, so each residence hall that was part of the behavior change campaign got this pledge, different sort of description of what they're pledging to do, and then you saw this very public demonstration of how many students in each hall had pledged. That's a way sort of to reinforce these activities amongst their peers to see, oh, well, all these other folks in my hall are doing it, I should do it too, sort of a normalizing of behavior. A lot of times folks don't do the behavior because they're not reminded, so we had some stickers that we developed and put in different places like in the showers or at the toilet, especially something like dual flush toilet handle. It doesn't work if you're not telling people how to utilize it, and remind them, put it where they're actually reaching to use the handle, but also shower, right? You put it by the handle. So showers were one part of this. We had a series of posters. These, again, were developed out of the psychology's, their lab. So they did some sort of laboratory setting testing on these, and then they were able to roll them out into the residence halls. You'll see a couple different versions of these. I will say, just for the posters, this really takes a lot of, seems basic, but a lot of social science behind how can you connect this back to aspects of personal comfort. You see the first one there about, personal comfort is sleeping in. So how do you sleep? Well, you shorten your shower. Humor is really important. You see the dog there, that's a celebrity on campus. He is part of our wellness center, and TiVo is sort of known on campus. And so you'll see that again. Things are very visual. So the pile of books, all the M&Ms, again, it gets into comfort, these ideas of comfort, and then this idea, the moral aspect as far as the inconvenience. You'll see a lot of social justice stuff happening around Loyola, and so we touched on that a little bit. Then something we did, which I thought was pretty great, again, this is working off a campus celebrity, is these goodie bags that were left. So that's dish soap and toothpaste. And so for the folks who were part of the behavior change campaign, and I mean all the students in those residence halls, when they came back from the winter break, they were greeted with this little goodie bag, which had dish soap and toothpaste with these stickers on them. I don't know if you can see it there, but here you should be able to see a little better. Sister Jean is one of the nuns who's here on campus. She's actually the chaplain for one of our sports teams, and was very pleasant to do some photos with us, doing her own dishes and brushing her teeth. And just as a reminder on the toothpaste tubes and on the dish soap, that Sister Jean, the celebrity, sort of normalizing of it, if she's doing it, you can do it too, is right there and in your face. So we thought this was great, and we actually made, there's templates for all these posters and all the stickers that we made available as part of the project, and they're available on a website. I'll share a link with a little bit later. We gave some educational programs into these residence halls. These were smaller because they were much more selected. You'll see that only the residence halls that were part of the behavior change were allowed to attend. But it's, we didn't have huge turnout, but we did try to sweeten the deal by making, different raffle tickets and things available. Chipotle, you can see a Jambox speaker available for participation. This is one of the activities was actually this idea of, again, visualizing your impact of carrying a 5-gallon bucket, which we did out here on a plaza right in front of one of these residence halls. So there were a lot of things we did as part of the behavior change campaign. Again, more posters. The problem with posters and other signage is it becomes like wallpaper. They start looking past it. So if you can go in and update that material from time to time. We took down the first set of posters. We put up a second set of posters in February, and then again in March. So you can just see some similar themes. Again, these were all sort of tested with other students in a lab setting by the psychology department. If you want more information there, I can connect you to the psychology faculty who led that effort. We did a second round of surveys, and we actually had a very good response rate again, over 50% this time. Of course, we did sweeten the deal for participation. But this one, we were asking not just those same questions about values and goals as it related to their water consumption or their perception of water consumption, we also asked for feedback as it related to the behavior change messaging that they had observed, if they had observed behavior change messaging, and if they had observed retrofits, because as I said, many of those took place over the winter break, so they had feedback on what things they thought were effective or not. Finally, aspect of this project was lab retrofits. As I said, I thought this was going to be big uptake, big participation. It was less than that. We sent out messages saying that we had resources to support lab water efficiency retrofits to our chairs for physics, chemistry, bio, environmental science to share with their faculty, and we also went and presented. We have an annual lab safety symposium where all the lab techs and many of the faculty have to participate in, and we really only got a very small interest. I think three different groups were interested. We ended up supporting 2. One was really minor. It was switching out 2 faucets. They had sort of a standard lab faucet, the one with sort of barbed things so you can hook hoses up to it or other apparatus. They didn't need it for that lab setting, and it was using a lot of water, so they switched it out, basically saved half the water use in those faucets for when they're on, but just 2 faucets, really minor. And then the other one was a teaching lab. So this is in a chemistry teaching lab where they have a water-driven aspirator under 24 different hoods. And this is in this space, there's like 14 sections a year. Of those, they're doing 6 or 7 labs each year. So these faucets are running for an hour and a half all these times, and using a liter a minute. So that's a lot of water. That's about 200,000 liters in a year that just these labs are using. And so we identified an opportunity to replace those with these. These are just a little recirculating system. So you fill the reservoir there, and then it just does the same thing. Water flows past the organic reaction and helps address the contaminants that are being released, but you obviously aren't just having a faucet going full bore for an hour and a half. You just have this small pump running for an hour and a half. There is an electricity impact, of course, with the pump running, but it's not just flushing all that perfectly good water down the drain. So it does take water. You still have to fill the reservoir for each lab section, but we think the savings of this will be about just under 50,000 gallons a year. So we felt pretty good about that. I'll get into the results of the lab retrofits a little in a minute, but I say that the lab thing was probably the most disappointing of the whole initiative. So just in general, we have a lot of other water outreach efforts on our campus. This is an example of an event we do during Water Week. You see that trivia wheel there, so it has different categories. They spin the wheel, they answer different water-related trivia, and they get prizes like the reusable bottles you see there in front of one of our student interns, Taylor. But for us, water really does come from the sort of social justice place. We have a lot of faculty who do aquatic ecology research, and so there's interest, and we're right here on the shores of Lake Michigan. So there's really interested in the aquatic ecology side, but from a social justice place and water use globally, we find a lot of student interest. So connecting that to water efficiency has been pretty effective for us. We've also done things like ban the use of plastic water bottles on the sale of plastic water bottles on campus, and help invest money into well and social justice groups around the world. So I won't go into any more of that. I'll share the results because I'm running out of time here. So as I said, we did about almost 800 pieces of equipment that we retrofitted. We have seen some initial water reduction use, and I'll show you that in a second with the residence halls, but we're really expecting to keep tracking that over time. We get water bills every 2 months, and so we can sort of see when students are in those facilities that have been retrofitted, what's the impact. But if we model out those retrofits with some assumptions about how long that piece of equipment will last, we see about 30 million gallon savings over the life of those pieces of equipment, whether it's an aerator lasting for 5 years or whether it's a toilet lasting for 20 years. We see some really great savings, and just to put it in dollars, I mean, at our current water rate, that's $200,000 over the next 20 years once you add up the different lifespans of the different fixtures. Not expecting everything's going to last 20 years, but that's less than a year on a return on investment. Of course, that only includes the cost for the equipment. All of our labor was in-house. It was our own folks that were doing the retrofits, but still, it really does make its case well. So I just want to say that was, straightforward, the most successful part of the project, just that we were able to use this project to initialize all these other retrofits and for us to do our own in-kind work. Oh, this has an animation in it. I didn't realize that. So this is a slide that was put together by one of the psychology faculty, but on the behavior change, here's some results from that very first survey, which has been published in a book, The Contribution of Social Sciences to Sustainable Development at Universities, which was released a little earlier this year. And so there's an article put out which really asks the question from that first survey of how the material values of the students connected to their water consumption. And what we found was they did directly connect. If the students were much more materially driven, so the things that they owned were really important to them, then they tended to say that they used more water and had a less water conservative activities. We also asked questions about how their personal comfort was important to them, and also their goal to conserve water was important to them. And we found that the materiality of the individual directly connected to personal comfort, but didn't directly connect to water conservation. However, both their comfort goals and their conservation goals did directly connect to water use. Of course, comfort, they use more water, and in conservation they use less water. And I'm not the statistician who worked through all these numbers, so I can't get into the details of the statistics. Calla Melchiori or Robin Mallet would be more than happy to go through all this with anybody who'd be interested, but it is published and available if you want to dive into it and see what kind of questions they ask to get at these kinds of goals and values. It is to say that then what that leads to is how do we address the materiality? And if we're trying to lead to some change, how do we sort of address the personal comfort? If you're striving to address your own personal comfort, and that being linked to more water use, how can we try to intervene there somehow? And that sort of informed some of the posters that you saw. So we need to find ways to support that water conservation goal to sort of overtake the personal comfort goal if we can. So, and to maybe downplay the materiality piece or help try to address that in some way. So in the second survey, which was done sort of post, we asked questions about the control groups, or the ones that didn't get the behavior change, and the ones who did, and we saw them self-reporting back that the ones who got the campaign seemed to think that they used less water. We'll see if that's true in a second, but we also saw that if little aspects of the campaigns, which was effective, which did they feel were more effective, and just for an aside, we have some of that written up. This is not published yet, but it's coming up soon, we think, is that we actually, some of the things like the pledges are good, the signage is good, but the actual, direct intervention, if you can get right involved with somebody and they can take action around these issues, obviously that's more likely it's going to lead to some sort of actual behavior change. So then we got feedback on the behavior change messages, which did they like, which didn't they like, and also the fixtures. Some people didn't notice that things had been retrofitted and others did. I would say just, well, I'll get to that at the end. But so here's a little chart of the actual water use in these different spaces. So you'll see these bars as far as their water use and their deviation, standard deviations. But so the white is the control residence halls, the black is they only got retrofit, the one with the hashes is identity only, and then the gray is the retrofit and identity. Hope you can see that, but it's same order as it's listed on the bottom. So, you know, here's what it was the 2 falls prior. Here's what it was the 2 years spring. We often see that in our residence halls actually use a little bit more water in the fall. I think it's partially related to temperature. It might also be because early in the school year they're paying more attention to their appearance, and that drops off as the year gets underway. Maybe that's just my own opinion. But again, the fall before, we saw the water, you know, it was up a little bit from the fall the year before, but then we really did those interventions listed in the timeline in that winter break between fall and spring, and so we saw with the control group, water use went up slightly compared to the spring before, but it looks like it was close to being within sort of the margin. Not when you compare it to the fall, but if you just compare it to the spring. But then the areas that got the retrofit only and the areas that got the behavior change only, you see this significant dip in their water use. The question is, a question we don't have a great answer for, is why did the hall that got both the retrofits and the behavior change, you know, it's still within sort of a margin of error, but it went up slightly. So why is that? What happened? That was Fairfield. What happened in Fairfield? Why aren't we seeing the benefit of the retrofits? Does that mean that the behavior change spiked even more individual water use? Because we should be seeing the retrofit benefit pop in there. And that's something that we really want to look at over time. In the summer when it's not occupied, and you know, are we going to see something different this fall that we just passed, and this spring that we're in right now? What are we going to see? So that's something we want to look at over time. This is included in that presentation, but it's something we want to spend a little bit more time on going forward. Again, this is under review, and if anybody wants to see this, I'm sure Robin and Kala would be able to share the draft of what they have. All right, I'm almost done, but just in wrapping up, I wanted to say that, you know, when you're thinking about residence hall water retrofits, it takes a lot of time and coordination. We went in thinking this would be slam dunk, we'll just go through and do it. You want to do it when there's not students around, ideally, so that you don't have sort of preconceived feelings about what a fixture is supposed to look like. Ideally, you would do it in the summer. We did it in the winter. I think that actually wasn't the best time. We did have some feedback on some of those surveys that students noticed that a faucet wasn't flowing the same. Some folks loved it because they had crummy old shower heads, and these new water efficiency shower heads felt better. Others hated it because they had a really bad but really strong shower head before. So ideally, you know, this is something you could do in the summer, I guess is my feedback just on timing for retrofits. Again, I mentioned all the great benefits of having students participating in the audits, but that was really helpful. I talked about this with the behavior change, but just that really to identify actions and behaviors that are doable and that are sort of connected or to that personal comfort. This will make you more comfortable. This will let you sleep in, or this will you know, save you money that you can spend on somewhere else. So not that they're paying their water bills, but the idea is there. You want to incorporate humor. You want to incorporate the celebrities, campus celebrities, or other celebrities. It makes it memorable. It needs to be normative. It needs to be thought of as something that everyone else is doing, and then really make it vivid, make it something that sticks with you again, so it's memorable. And then what we did see is that not always does that perception of behavior change actually translate to water conservation. That's something we need to work through a little bit more in that Fairfield example where we didn't see it, even though they reported being more conservative. So we want to understand that a little bit more. Yeah, in the other halls, it did show up as actual water conservation. For the lab piece, I'll just say it's one of those classic examples of split incentive. There's no motivation for the folks in those labs to conserve water. They're not getting the money back, even if they're getting different newer fixtures, they're not getting a savings that they can spend somehow else in their department. So you'd really have to have some sort of a shadow budgeting for water or for other utilities in order for this to be efficient. I know other schools have been able to do that. We aren't able to do that with our structure here. So either facilities needs to go in and just say, this is our priority, we're doing it, and we're going to put these fixtures into this lab and work with this because facilities and their utility budgets who's getting the benefit, or there needs to be a way to show a benefit to the actual folks who oversee those lab spaces. Those were the results from the lab. So just in wrapping up, I really want to thank ISTC, of course, for the funding, and Loyola, who put a lot of money behind the work for the in-kind work, and there was some money received from our sustainability fund, the Green Initiative Fund, to help with some incentivizing work, especially Robin Mallett and Callum Melchiori, different facility staff, residence life staff who helped facilitate this work. Although I'm presenting this work, this really was the work of Han Pham, who worked with me here in the sustainability office. She was great, and then of course all of the great students and interns that we worked with doing audits, implementing these programs. Thank them all. There's more materials here if you want to look at the templates for any of those posters or this report. The prize wheel is available. There's the templates for the prize wheel up on our site. And then here's some resources as far as water efficiency, how to do audits, how to calculate savings, other things like that. With that, I'm all done, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron. Very informative talk. Do we have some questions here in our audience that anyone would like to ask?
Moving forward, how do you expect to reach, each class year as they come in?
That's a great question. So, right, the challenge of doing sustainability at a university setting is that the opportunity is that we get a new audience coming in every year. The challenge is that we lose our audience, or at least a quarter of our audience every year. So we really have not done very much on the water efficiency behavior work in the residence hall setting this year. There's a couple of reasons for that. Partially is some turnover in my own staff, partially is turnover in residence life staff. We do have outreach and engagement efforts every year around water efficiency, energy efficiency, waste and recycling and composting, and a variety of different things. But I think now that we have gotten some feedback on what parts of that outreach was successful, I'd like to do is really develop a person within our residence life staff who can have this as their motivation, have this as their task annually to make sure that each residence hall has these resources and is putting them up and making them up to date. We had that in the past with a staff person in our residence life staff, and he left, and we've struggled to sort of find that institutionalized resource in the last couple of years. So I think we have a good roadmap from this project, but on what we should be doing, but we don't necessarily have all of our infrastructure in place right now.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Any other questions here? And I don't believe we have any online, so we want to thank you again, Aaron, for your presentation today. And
sure.
We'll conclude the seminar then. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Bye, everyone.